Climate change is the greatest existential threat facing humanity today. Unlike many global issues that affect specific regions or populations, climate change touches every corner of the Earth and every aspect of our lives. It disrupts the delicate balance of our ecosystems, threatens the stability of our economies, jeopardizes public health, and poses a severe challenge to future generations. What makes this crisis even more alarming is the fact that it is largely man-made and yet entirely solvable. The planet has always undergone shifts in climate, but the rapid changes we are witnessing today are unprecedented in speed and scale. Scientists overwhelmingly agree that human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, are the main drivers of global warming. These activities release greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, into the atmosphere. These gases trap heat from the sun, causing the Earth's average temperature to rise. This process, known as the greenhouse effect, is natural and necessary to sustain life. However, excessive greenhouse gas emissions have intensified this effect, pushing the planet toward dangerous temperature thresholds. Since the late 19th century, the Earth's average surface temperature has risen by approximately 1.1 degrees Celsius. While that may sound minimal, it has triggered catastrophic changes in weather patterns, polar ice melt, sea level rise, and biodiversity loss. In recent years, extreme weather events have become more frequent and intense. We have seen scorching heat waves, unprecedented wildfires, devastating hurricanes, and record-breaking floods. Each event causes immense destruction, displacing families, damaging infrastructure, and costing billions in economic losses. These are no longer isolated incidents, they are part of a pattern driven by a warming planet. Moreover, climate change is a threat multiplier. It exacerbates existing inequalities, disproportionately affecting the poor, marginalized communities, and developing nations that have contributed the least to global emissions. Small island nations, for instance, face the risk of becoming uninhabitable due to rising sea levels. Farmers in drought-prone regions struggle to grow food. Entire communities are forced to migrate as their lands become unlivable, giving rise to what experts now call climate refugees. Beyond its environmental and humanitarian toll, climate change also carries significant economic consequences. If left unchecked, it could reduce global GDP by up to 18% by 2050. According to studies by leading financial institutions, damage to property from extreme weather, loss of productivity due to heat stress, reduced agricultural yields, and healthcare costs from pollution and disease are just a few examples of how the climate crisis affects our wallets. On the other hand, the transition to a green economy presents a massive opportunity. Investing in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and eco-friendly technologies can create millions of jobs, stimulate innovation, and reduce long-term costs. Climate action is not just about saving the planet, it's also about building a more resilient and equitable future. The causes of climate change are well documented. Chief among them is the combustion of fossil fuels for electricity, transportation, and industrial activity. Deforestation also plays a major role. Trees naturally absorb carbon dioxide, and when they are cut down or burnt, that stored carbon is released into the atmosphere. Industrial agriculture contributes to methane emissions from livestock and nitrous oxide from fertilizers. Waste management practices, such as the use of landfills and incineration, release additional greenhouse gases. Our consumption habits driven by convenience, overproduction, and planned obsolescence further compound the problem. In short, climate change is deeply embedded in the way we produce and consume energy, food, and goods. Despite the dire warnings, there is hope. We already possess many of the tools needed to address climate change. Renewable energy sources like solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal are cleaner, increasingly affordable, and scalable. Transitioning away from fossil fuels and investing in energy efficiency can drastically reduce emissions. Improving public transportation, shifting to electric vehicles, and designing walkable cities can reduce our reliance on oil. Nature-based solutions, such as reforestation, wetland restoration, and sustainable land management, not only sequester carbon, but also protect biodiversity and enhance climate resilience. Sustainable agriculture practices, plant-based diets, and reducing food waste can mitigate emissions from the food system. A shift toward a circular economy, where resources are reused and waste is minimized, also offers promising avenues for long-term sustainability. International cooperation is essential. The Paris Agreement, adopted in 2015, marked a historic step as nearly every nation on Earth committed to limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, with efforts to stay within 1.5 degrees. Achieving this goal requires countries to submit and update their climate action plans known as Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs, and implement policies to cut emissions, adapt to impacts, and provide financing for vulnerable nations. As of now, most countries are not on track to meet their targets. The current trajectory suggests a warming of 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, which scientists warn would be catastrophic. It is vital that governments enhance their commitments, align policies with scientific recommendations, and hold one another accountable. But climate change is not only a political issue, it is a personal one. Every individual has a role to play in combating this crisis. Simple actions such as reducing energy use, conserving water, using public transport, recycling, and making climate-conscious purchasing decisions can collectively have a significant impact. Reducing meat consumption, supporting local produce, and avoiding single-use plastics are additional ways to lower one's carbon footprint. Educating oneself and others about climate change, advocating for policy reform, and supporting organizations working for environmental justice are equally important. Citizens can also use their voices by voting for leaders who prioritize sustainability, and by holding corporations accountable for their environmental practices. One of the most pressing aspects of climate change is the urgency to act. Scientists warn that we have a limited window, roughly the next 5 to 10 years, to implement deep and systemic changes before we cross irreversible tipping points. These tipping points include the collapse of polar ice sheets, thawing of permafrost that could release vast amounts of methane, and the potential loss of the Amazon rainforest, which could shift from a carbon sink to a carbon source. Once triggered, these feedback loops could lead to runaway climate change, rendering parts of the planet uninhabitable. Climate justice must also be at the heart of our response. The climate crisis is deeply intertwined with issues of inequality, colonialism, and systemic injustice. Indigenous peoples, despite having contributed the least to global emissions, are among the most affected and yet possess invaluable traditional ecological knowledge that can aid in restoration efforts. Women and children are often more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, particularly in low-income communities. Ensuring an inclusive transition means investing in climate education, creating green jobs in underserved areas, and involving diverse voices in decision-making. The good news is that we are not starting from scratch. Around the world, people are rising to the challenge, activists marching in the streets, scientists sounding the alarm, engineers building better solutions, and communities planting trees and reclaiming land. Major cities are pledging carbon neutrality, companies are setting science-based targets, and youth movements are demanding accountability. These efforts signal a growing recognition that the status quo is no longer acceptable. In conclusion, climate change is not a distant or abstract problem. It is real, it is here, and it affects every single one of us. But while the threat is immense, so is the opportunity. We are the first generation to fully understand the science of climate change, and possibly the last with the power to stop it. The path we choose today will shape the world for centuries to come. We can continue on our current course and face worsening disasters, economic disruption, and mass suffering, or we can rise to the occasion, make bold changes, and forge a new era of sustainability, resilience, and justice. The future is not yet written. It is ours to decide. Let it be a future where we chose courage over complacency, unity over division, and hope over despair.